Welcome to the Fin Virtual Learning Series. Please note that this session will be offered in English for the first 30 minutes. The French session will immediately follow at 2 p.m. Veuillez noter que cette session sera offerte en anglais pour les premières 30 minutes et que la session en français suivra à 2 heures. I would begin by acknowledging that I'm here on the traditional and ceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land you're on as well. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for the questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. Please note that there will be no Q&A portion to this session. However, we will take your questions, find the answers, and share them as a resource on our Fin GC Wiki page. The moderator might also ask your questions live today. As someone who has been in the public service for around 5 years, I can remember a time when early in my career, I would be hearing terms such as ATIP, Section 34, or labor relations thrown around in meetings, and an immediate feeling of confusion would ensue. Some of these terms I was explained rather quickly because they directly impacted my daily work, while others took months or even years to understand. Today, we are learning about comms, one of my personal favorite topics. Before we get started, we have a couple of poll questions to assess your knowledge before the session. Don't worry, it's just for fun. There is really no stress to this component or to any of this session, honestly. So the first question is a true or false. External communications are useful to inform employees of activities happening within their own department. Second question, what is alt text? Is it text translated from the original language? Is it a description of an image for screen readers? Or is it top secret communications? And last questions, can my activities on social media put my job in jeopardy? Yes, no, or unsure. So we'll give you a couple of seconds to answer these questions. It's another 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. All right, can we show the answers? Perfect. So for the first question, the key word was really external. So external communications are useful to inform employees of activities happening within their own department. The split was pretty 50-50, so 56% said false and 44% said true. It is false. That description of there would be a better description of internal communications. Question number 2, what is alt text? So 80%, a good majority of people said it's a description of an image for screen readers, which is accurate. So good job on that one. And then, can my activities on social media put my job in jeopardy? A good overwhelming majority of 90% said that yes, they can. And the 90% are once again correct. So thank you for that. So without further ado, I will give the mic off to Monica Chevalier, who will be our moderator for today's session. The floor is yours, Monica.
Thank you so much, Olivier. Happy to be here. And we have Alex Sabourin joining us today. I will read his bio for you all and get this party started. I'm happy that you put up those questions, Olivier, because it got me thinking as well. And that we have Alex here to answer and talk about those questions. So born in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean and having grown up in Sandy Hill in Ottawa, Alex Sabourin spent most of his University of Ottawa student life working for the school paper La Rotonde and hosting various community radio shows. Post-graduation, Alex was bridging at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, where he spent 10 years working in media monitoring and analysis, media relations, and strategic communications. After a stint in criminal justice comms at Public Safety Canada, he now leads events and partnerships for the Communications Community Office. So thank you so much for being here with us, Alex.
Thanks, Monica. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and with folks from the Federal Youth Network. So thanks for having me.
That's great. So today on GC101, we're going to explore some key concepts that some of us should have recognized in the comms world. And I'm happy to be here because a lot of stuff that I want to learn myself. So let's get started. All right, so for your first question, what does it mean when we hear people say from a comms perspective? Like what is from a comms perspective mean? Yeah.
It's kind of nebulous, eh? But it's something you'll hear time and time again. So maybe before I talk like about the famous comms perspective and what that means, I wanted to start with like a quick snapshot of the DNA of an average communicator. So you may have seen a meme before that shows you the difference between comms and policy. People that work in policy for the government. So there's various ones, but there's one that I've seen before that I love that's got Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell from the movie Crazy Stupid Love. And if you've seen the movie, you'll know that Ryan is kind of like the well-dressed, suave, cool dude, and Steve is, well, like just a little less cool, And so that's kind of like, with that picture in mind, I kind of like to romanticize and think of folks who works in comms as, fun, dynamic, free-flowing, and a little bit of like kind of fast-paced adrenaline junkies because the work is very fast-paced. Often kind of a mix of type A keeners and a bit scattered. So kind of a mix of that, and storytellers at heart who just love to, tell a good story. So if we go back to the question, the comms perspective piece, when you hear somebody say that, it's basically about, defining your objectives, being strategic, because why are you communicating if you're not asking the right questions? Like, who's your audience? What is the public environment? What's your reason for communicating? What are you trying to achieve? And if you're not doing those things, then you're probably, not thinking about it from that comms perspective. So, what we often see in comms is clients asking us for things like, just something they want. Like, I want an infographic. I want a video. I want you to make a viral social media post for me. And, you always have to kind of go back to them and say, okay, well, who's it for? And why do they need to know? What do you want them to do? What's the actual call to action? So that's really that comms perspective that comes into play. And of course, reminding them of things like the accessibility aspects of keeping things really plain language and being digital by default. So that's really kind of what I would say is the comms perspective piece.
Okay, so from what I'm getting here, your brain is always on, like when you're in a meeting, when you're writing an email, when you're receiving communications, you're always paying attention to like who, what, when, where, why, and kind of like the marketing side of things too, right?
Yeah, the objective and the goal, and marketing, like it's a part of communications. Like you'll often have a marketing team in your comms branch who works on advertising, but everybody's kind of doing a little bit of that marketing piece. Social media is marketing nowadays. Everybody who's writing messaging is marketing. So yeah, that definitely fits into play in terms of that comms perspective. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And so we had one of the questions in the poll kind of touched on this next one a little bit. Can you explain the difference between internal versus external communications?
For sure. And I think most people got it, but even myself, I was kind of like reading the question and thinking to myself, could you communicate externally to your employees? Absolutely, you can in a certain way. So I'll just say it like in simple terms, external comms is anything that's going out to the public. So, something that's meant for media, like we have the news release, which is the most classic comms product in the history of the government of Canada. We just can't let it go. But like anything that's web content, social media, even like a speech that's written for a departmental official or the minister at a public event. So you'll often hear the old adage, how would that look on the front page of the Globe and Mail? And so that's like, is just to say, like, if it's gonna go out in the public, you better be ready for it to be on the front page, and like, how would you react to that? So that's kind of like the external piece. It can be a whole bunch of stuff, but internal comms is really anything that's just meant for employee consumption that can only be accessed internally. So anything on your organization's intranet, if you receive employee communications by email or newsletters, like, that kind of thing, events that you attend that are internal or probably, partly organized by your internal comms folks, like town halls, departmental awards, GCWCC stuff, and then signage, like TVs that are displaying messaging for employees. So you can also have like internal videos and podcasts. Like there's a lot of overlap, which is what I was saying between external and internal. Not social media, because just the nature of the platforms makes it that it's external by nature, unless you've got like your own employee wiki or something, but that's kind of like the main distinction. Something I hear often is like internal comms is less important or glamorous as external comms. And I just want to dispel that notion. Like that's simply untrue because especially like in the current context, the pandemic's kind of made employee communication super important. The return to the physical office for some means that there's tons of importance to like polling employees, talking to them. So yeah, that information we get from our organizations is super important. And I mean, I worked in external comms for most of my career. Now in my current role with the communications community office, big plug with the branding behind me, I'm helping fellow communicators like improve and providing them with tools to make their jobs easier. So it can be super fun and creative and a really exciting part of communications. So
thank you. So if you could tell me what not the difference, but what do you do differently when you're working on internal versus external communications? Like, I don't want to say like, do you put more effort, but what are some procedures? Like, do you have to get it reviewed by a little more people for external than internal, and so on?
That's a great question, because I find that when you're communicating internally, you're right there with your fellow employees in terms of any scrutiny or the way things are said. So if anything, there's maybe more of that, immediate impact for you in terms of your work. Of course, external comms, you'll see how it plays out, and you'll know if you need to make a course change. But you're right there when you're communicating internally. So with your fellow employees right near you, I'd say the approvals obviously for external comms usually go to the minister's office, or like whoever that external spokesperson is. So that's what you need to keep in mind. And so that's like an extra level. Whereas internal comms, usually the buck stops with your departmental head, whether that's the deputy minister or your commissioner or, whoever's the chief of your organization. And so there's a bit of a difference there, but no matter what, you have an ultimate boss and you need to make sure that they're okay with the messaging. So
of course. And you always aim to do a good job anyways. It's not like you're gonna slack off for internal, but your name's there. That's your name. You're posting it. You're writing it. So whatever happens, you're the
if employees don't, exactly, they'll let you know. You'll be talking about it with your colleagues at lunch. So
that's true. That's true. Oh man. Okay. So next question. What are the essential things to include when briefing management or clients on comms issues?
So first rule of comms, and I guess it goes back to that Globe and Mail kind of piece, is like no surprises. And I think it's probably true in many different jobs, but in the comms world, it's like if your instinct tells you there's something that could catch somebody off guard at a public event, or once it's out in the public, you better do your best to flag it and be prepared with an answer, like key messages to help respond to any kind of tricky questions. So the last thing you want is for somebody to get caught off guard, departmental official, your management, or worse, like the minister. That said, everybody kind of works collaboratively, and stays informed of the issues. You got to think about your public environment and what's happening in the media, but you got to be ready to basically, write those emails, those tricky emails, flagging things, often picking up the phone to talk, to figure out potential answers to tricky questions. And you'll always be thinking about those key messages or documents we call question and answer documents, basically, where you're anticipating what questions could be. on anything you're announcing, like a program or whatever, and having answers ready for your spokespeople. So really, when you're briefing, yeah, that's it. Kind of staying on top of the issues, the public environment, with your media stakeholders, what the public in all parts of Canada, all different types of publics would react to, any specific communications. And something we often are called upon to do as communicators is playing that challenge function. Once again, I know it's kind of part of every every job, I think, across the governments, but you're doing your job as a communicator if you're challenging and questioning, suggesting a better way of doing things. Sometimes it's being a better steward of public funds, by finding like a better strategy, like instead of that splashy video, that advertising campaign that's going to cost X amount, you do it organically, on social media or by email, and then you've done a good job in terms of the way you've tackled the communications issue. So
your recommendations matter for sure. Yeah. We do have a question in the Q&A section here. Are all stakeholders consultations and notice to industry required to be posted on a GC website that's publicly accessible? If yes, what is the minimum advance notice to post a stakeholder consultation on the GC website?
Oh, that's a specific tricky one there. Honestly, I am not sure what the minimum advance notice is. I will say yes, that they all need to be posted. There's, the Consulting with Canadians website where all consultations are publicly posted. But I don't know the answer offhand for the amount of days. Like I would say 30 days, but that don't quote me on that.
You know where they could find the answer to the question though?
Say it again.
Do you know where they could find the answer? Like, is there like a website or?
Yes, Consulting with Canadians. So you, if you type that into Google, I'm not sure if that's the exact URL, but you'll find all of the consultations posted along with information. And so, yeah, no, that's definitely a big piece of the transparency of any public engagement that the government is doing. And so, yeah, and the accessibility piece is also obviously of paramount importance. And I can talk a little bit about that later as well. But yeah, we're just improving all the times in terms of our accessibility, but it does need to be available in multiple different formats and be accessible to the maximum amount of Canadians. So.
No, I agree, and I'm glad there's that's being looked at and prioritized. There are more questions in the chat, but I will ask you this one beforehand. So let's talk more about social media, because that was also mentioned earlier, and I think most of us do have social media accounts. Can you tell us a bit more about what it means when talking about personal versus professional use of social media?
For sure. So I think it's not a stretch to say that probably the first thing most of us did this morning when we woke up was check a social media account of some sort. Maybe you did something really innocuous, like post your Wordle score on Twitter, or you at least like commented or liked on something on Instagram. Maybe you even like inadvertently liked something, double tapped on it without thinking about it too much, or totally by mistake. So as public servants, that's something that you definitely need to watch a little bit closer, because we are for sure free to have social media accounts, and you can totally use them to share your work, collaborate with others, engage. You're free to identify who you work for and your job title if you want to do so. But even if you don't, and it's just like a personal account, as a public servant, your social media use is always guided by the values and ethics code. So that's 24/7, 365. You're employed by the public service. You have to abide by the values and ethics code. And so as long as you're respecting that and protecting like the public's trusts and public institutions, remaining impartial in your interactions, you're good to go. So to keep it simple, I'll kind of give you some top do's and don'ts of navigating social media as a public servant. So totally shout out the great work you and your team are doing, and get permission before you kind of share things that are not just about you, like event videos or photos. Very important. You can totally tag and people you collaborate with. You can like, post, and share information like job leads and recruitment campaigns. But one thing that we really need to be doing at all times that I'm going to caution against is to verify your sources. So anything that you're doing, any interactions you're doing, this is something that we all should be doing, not just public servants, but avoid spreading misinformation, disinformation. Triple check your sources, and my goodness, like, it's getting harder and harder, obviously, because it's pretty wild out there. It's the Wild West. And that's kind of it. In the end, there is a lot of gray area, and so I'll give you kind of some tips in terms of making sure you're doing the right thing in the end if you're unsure. But I'll give you some don'ts first. So some things you absolutely don't want to do. Don't mistreat others with harassment, defamation, hate propaganda, copyright infringement. Like, that's all things that are probably just going to get you booted off a social media platform, even if you're not a public servant. So never okay. Don't disclose sensitive or protected information, on things you're working on, or information that's not intended for public consumption, like things that have not been externally communicated. Like, don't disclose that stuff. If you do it, like even by accident, it could have some pretty serious consequences, and then you'd have to kind of respond for your actions. And then back to that values and ethics code, avoid discussions that criticize or attack the government and its policies. Stay impartial. Like, you really need to think twice before you tag a partisan account or a political party, and make sure that you're abiding by that values and ethics code. So if you're still kind of in doubt, because it is like social media activity, it's full of gray area. You're not, it's not abnormal to kind of be in doubt sometimes. Reach out to your manager, reach out to your values and ethics office, your designated political activities rep, like, when there's election time coming, you can talk to that person, or even your comms team, your department's comms team can totally give you some advice on some specific activities. If you're thinking, like, is it okay if I do this in the context of that? They can give you tips. And if you want, there's also a great training from the Canada School of Public Service. It's called Navigating Social Media as a Public Servant. If you just do a search for that on the Canada School of Public Service platform, it's a 2-hour online course, and it'll give you like tons more details than what I just kind of went over in a nutshell there. So
that's great. We'll see if we can get that in the chat too, so people listening can check it out. I think that learning how to properly communicate and put yourself out on social media is so important. Like, you have your personal life, but I have Facebook and Instagram, and there are some colleagues I have on there, but some that I don't. And it's not because I don't like them, but it's just, there's some things that are more personal. And then I have a LinkedIn. LinkedIn for me is such a gray zone because that touches only on my career, my professional growth and things like that. But can you talk more a little bit about LinkedIn? Because I feel like that is where I acknowledge my team and so on. And I talk about my government job, but I wouldn't necessarily bring it up so much on my personal.
I think that's a great question, because LinkedIn is intrinsically linked to your job. When you're on there, you've identified who you work for. You're there as a representative of that organization in many ways. So even though it's a personal account, I think the interactions there, on any account where you're identifying that you're a government employee, I think you need to take extra scrutiny, because you are really putting yourself out there as representing that organization. And that's not to say, once again, it goes back to the values and ethics. Anything you're doing on your personal account is just as it's just as important to abide by it on personal accounts. But I think, the extra scrutiny when you are representing an organization, because people will just it's just common sense, right? You're going to be associated directly with your workplace. And so anyone who sees that from the outside will say, hey, it's Monica from, National Defense saying this, like, right? So it's different than if it's your, I don't know, Instagram account. You've posted a vacation pic and it's for your friends, So I think that's just it. You need to use your common sense to a certain degree, right? So
for sure. Thank you. We don't have much time left. There are a few questions in the chat, and if you want to get through as well. So quickly, sure. Madison is asking, if someone is interested in a particular type of communications, example, external or internal, is it possible to gauge this from a job posting, or all like communications job postings more general?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think in most cases, yes, like you will be able to see by the job description and the type of like criteria that they're looking for. If they say experience working on internal campaigns and that kind of thing, you'll know that it's more of an internal role. That said, I don't think it's one size fits all, and I think sometimes they may be looking to fill positions in multiple different areas within their comms shop. So your best bet is to reach out to the person on the poster and ask the question if you really want to ensure that you're applying for the right kind of job, that specific kind of job. So, but I would say your best bet is looking at the sort of the criteria, the qualifications, right? The essential qualifications and asset qualifications on the poster, and seeing if it matches up with the type of job you're looking for. But yeah, otherwise, reach out. Never bad to have a conversation with them.
For sure, for sure. All right, got 4 minutes left. I like this question from the Q&A, and it was something I kind of wanted to ask you as well about damage control. So this person asked, do you or your team ever find yourself doing damage control comms in terms of the federal government's reputation or brand? Or is there a specific team for issues like that?
I mean, I think that's everyone's job to a certain degree, just in terms of like, comms is a very issues-based job. So I wouldn't say like, you're in constant damage control. I think you do have to be mindful of the reputational aspect of anything you do, to be honest. And at the end of the day, like, ministers may change, but the organization itself remains. So in a way, it's like it's always something you're doing in terms of trying to position your activities and what you're doing in the best light possible, and going back to like, the benefits for Canadians and that kind of thing. So I think as long as like, but in terms of damage control, yeah, you've got some communications functions where there's perhaps you're dealing with that a bit more. If you're in strategic communications, you will likely be called upon to prepare for tougher questions and that kind of thing. So that's where you'll be more involved in that type of activity.
Mm-hmm. Could you, I may put you on the spot here for a little bit. Can you share a time where you sent something out and quickly felt the need to take it back? Or, like I've a few times even typed up emails myself and I would reread it. I have the Atsudat software on my computer, for those who know what that is. And sure enough, I'd send it out and my core would be like, did you mean to say that? And I'm like, oh my goodness, recall. Anything like that happened to you before?
I think it happens all the time, like in a way, it's something that, you'll get, I don't know, like a change from a client or from the minister's office, and then it somehow isn't, reflected in something that goes out. What you need to remember is there's always a way to make it right. If you notice a mistake, flag it and say it. Don't just think to yourself, oh no, it's over. Like there's always a way, whether it's a correction if the thing went out in the public, or even if you catch it beforehand. That's what I've learned, is you're never too late to catch it. And even if if you think it's the end of the world, usually it isn't. There's professionals and well-seasoned peeps down the line who will see things and know how to react to them. So never despair.
Thank you so much, Alex. Really appreciate it. And I see we have Olivier back with us now.
Merci, Monica.
Merci, Monica. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Alexandre. Thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, the session will be repeated in French at 2 p.m. Comme rappel, la session en français débutera sous peu. Resources will be available on the wiki page, and the recording of this event will be available on our YouTube channel.